DeMars. Atarka Red on your left, Esper Dragons on your right. We'll see how these players are able to do here.
Brian, in at least standard level formats, I typically associate with playing control strategies.
Likes to control.
Likes to play Esper, likes playing with counter spells. No surprise to see him on Esper Dragons.
I'm not surprised by this at all. Though in Modern, he's been playing a lot of Affinity.
Yeah, he mixes it up in the larger formats, and Vintage is kind of anything goes, right? But in the lower power formats, he likes to play control strategies.
It's a Mountain, it's a Monastery, Swift Spirit, it's an attack for 1. Now Brian knows exactly what he's up against, so we'll see if he kept a hand that's good against this strategy from Scherer.
Actually played against Brian at the Ravnica Black Constructed Pro Tour, and he was playing Esper in that tournament. Not surprising.
Not too surprising at all. DeMars is going to start things off with a Temple of Deceit. You see a little scrying taking place. He's going to leave that card on top, it appears, and pass the turn back over to Scherer. Scherer will take a draw step. Picked up another Mountain. Perhaps it's time for a Dragon Fodder. It is. So 2 Goblins and a Trigger of Prowess will allow the Swift Spirit to attack here for 2 points of damage. This is a great start here for Scherer. Doesn't have to be fancy. Just get some creatures on the table. You don't have to really worry about a card like Drown in Sorrow, game number 1.
Yeah, Esper Dragons is not doing something on the second turn. It's often not doing things for a lot of turns. You have to wait till 5 mana before you have a dragon available, or something like, Crux of Fate. But
copy of Thoughtseize. It'll show you a Lightning Strike, a Wild Slash, and 2 lands, and Mana Confluence and Mountain. So for this particular turn, if Scherer is able to draw another creature, he's probably in the driver's seat here. Doesn't really want to draw another burn spell. Though Atarka's Command would be a good draw this turn.
Though, if Brian's hand is soft, if he just doesn't have a removal spell, he could lose to just this board.
Absolutely. Dismal Backwater going to gain Brian a life. Scherer will take a draw step here. Picked up another Mountain, so he's starting to flood out a little bit here. He'll play a Mountain. There's Wild Slash. It's going to trigger the Prowess on the Swift Spear. The red zone's where we're going. It's a pretty healthy attack here, but Scherer is out of gas.
Yep. I think that any follow-up there probably is too much for Brian to overcome, but he's got a shot.
There's a Temple of Enlightenment. Take a look at the top card. It's a copy of Crux of Fate for DeMars. A little expensive for this matchup. It can be good at times, especially if he's on the play, but Brian is on the draw this particular game, so we'll see if he wants to keep that spell or not. Looks like that card's going to go to the bottom. We head back Scherer's way. He'll take a draw step. Picked up a copy of Stoke the Flames. That'll certainly help. Okay, we're going to play a Mountain. It's time to get into the red zone. No effect here, just going to pass the turn back with Stoke at the ready.
And I love that play from Caleb. I think a lot of people in that spot just go, all right, Stoke, you get a Prowess trigger.
Yep.
But Caleb knows Brian has to tap out at some point to answer the board, and then that's a window to resolve Stoke, which will probably be lethal.
Here come the beatdown jet again.
It's a very sharp play from Caleb.
DeMars down to 4. Draw a card, copy of Slumgar Scorn, and he is just dead. Nothing doing here for Brian DeMars. So Caleb Scherer going to win game number 1 over Brian DeMars. Atarka Red very quickly up over Esper Dragons, but not much of a surprise given the matchup.
Well, when Brian's on the draw, he's only got 3 copies of BioBlight and 3 copies of Hero's Downfall to really interact, assuming that Caleb does not play into Slumgar Scorn, and that's going to be a tough spot to win from. Also 4 copies of Foul Tongue Invocation. So he does have a healthy amount of removal, didn't find any of it there, and with him being on the draw, even Caleb's start kind of petering out there because he didn't find a lot of action. The initial wave of threats was still enough to take game 1.
We're going to start with Brian's sideboard. You see him already moving some cards in and out. What's he got over there? I assume Drown in Sorrow.
He's got a great sideboard for this matchup. 2 copies of Tassiger the Golden Fang, 2 Silence the Believers, 4 Ultimate Price, 3 Drown in Sorrows, a Negate, a Dragon Lord's Prerogative, 2 copies of Duress. The cards that definitely stand out here are the 4 copies of Ultimate Price, the 3 copies of Drown in Sorrow, and the 2 copies of Tassiger the Golden Fang. Just a cheap blocker is so much more powerful in this matchup than trying to deal something like Dig Through Time, and the removal spells are going to be great here as well. You go a little bit further, and Duress and Negate are fringe contenders. If Brian thinks that he's got some inefficient cards in this deck, Dig Through Time, Thought Seizes, maybe some of the counter spells would leave the deck, but the Ultimate Prices, the Drowned Sorrows, and the Tassigers are definitely huge improvements.
On Scherer's side, he's got 4 Elan of the Great Revel, 4 Roast, 2 Scouring Sands, 2 Goblin Heel Cutter, a Collateral Damage, an Arc Lightning, and a Magmatic Chasm. Love Eidolon in this matchup, of course, because you don't really want to have the burn spells. And then Heel Cutter I like too. It's just a kind of a pain to deal with.
Right, Roast is an extreme card to bring into the matchup because it's really only good against Tassiger, and a lot of these Esper Dragon sideboards don't even have that card. But the heel cutter is a good hedge. If he brings in Tassiker, heel cutter is pretty potent. And if Brian's on other creatures or even no creatures at all, heel cutter is still a functional card. Roast is a lot riskier to bring in.
Well. We will talk about very quickly as these players reshuffle up about regionals taking place in the summer of 2015 on August 1st. You see the locations available here. Some of them we're familiar with, like Wasteland Gaming in Atlanta, Comic Town in Columbus, Ohio, as well. Even Tales of Adventure in Washington, D.C. So some great stores out here that are hosting Star City Games regionals.
San Diego Games and Comics is a huge store out in San Diego. They run a lot of large events, so if you're in the Southern California area, recommend that store as well. Again, this will be occurring Pro Tour weekend. You head over to starcitygames.com/regionals for more information, but if you're looking to grind Open Series points, qualify for the Invitational, or just play in a large cash tournament during the Pro Tour weekend, you can find the regional championship closest to you.
And we can't forget about the playmat. That'll be available too as well. A little bit of a play on the Ellen DeGeneres Oscars photo. Again, this is free exclusive playmat to the first 200 players that do sign up, so you can get that out of the way right now. StarCityGames.com/regionals. You get all your information there for that fantastic tournament on August 1st as we do get ready here for game number 2 between Scherer and DeMars. Caleb Scherer, a player beginning to make a name for himself here on the Open Series circuit. You can learn more about him, the 26-year-old from St. Louis, Missouri, so not too far from here, about 4 hours drive. He's got one Invitational top 8. That was in Seattle at the Season 4 Invitational last year. He's also got one Open Series top 8, so he's looking to add more to that resume. Lives entirely out of his backpack. He travels to a lot of tournaments. Apparently his diet consists entirely of peanuts. I
would not recommend that to those of you at home.
That does not sound like a great idea. He's a rather skinny guy and graduated in mathematics and working on differential geometry. A lot of players in Magic actually have degrees in math. Not too surprising, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the skills are going to overlap, obviously, and statistics drive a lot of it. Game theory drives a lot of how you play Magic as well, so not shocking to see a lot of overlap.
But he's number 17 right now on our Season 3 leaderboard, and he is looking to keep climbing up those standings and get an at-large bid, I think, at the end of the year to qualify for the Players' Championship. Certainly seems like something that is on his mind, because we've seen him at a lot more tournaments this year.
Right, a lot of the players that we see that are high in the standings, a lot of those points are going to be on Season 3 or Season 4 finishes. Those eventually fall off, and at the end of the year, even someone who's in 17th place right now, if all of the results are coming from 2015, have a very good shot of qualifying for the Players' Championship.
And both these players will take a look at their opening hands. Brian is going to take a mulligan pretty quickly here. Not happy with what he saw. Not too surprising to see a mulligan here on DeMars' side either, because you're aggressively looking for specific cards in the matchup.
Well, his best cards are worth a lot of cards. Drown in Sorrow especially. Caleb's going to have some draws that just can't beat that card. And even a fast Tassiker is going to be hard for Caleb to beat a good percentage of the time.
And I think part of the reason that Atarka Red is a deck that's pretty well positioned in this particular tournament is there's been a real sharp decline in a card like Bile Blight, which is a card that's very, very good against Atarka Red when you have Dragon Fodder and, of course, Hordeling Outburst in your deck. But it's also just a good card against red decks in general, depending on how their draw lines up. And we've seen a lot of decks, especially the Abzan decks, move away from that card.
Right, and Brian's playing with 3 copies in his list, but even for his deck, it's not super reliable for him to cast it on the second turn.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of lands that come into play tap. He's got 4 islands, 3 Haven of the Spirit Dragons, Temples of Enlightenment. So even though he is helping out his matchup by having access to the card, he's not casting it on turn 2 a good percentage of the time.
See if Brian's happy with the 6 cards. Apparently he is. Caleb's got his 7. We're underway here in game number 2 between DeMars and Scherer. Temple of Silence, put the top card to the bottom there for DeMars. Scherer will draw a card. He's got a mountain. Does he have a 1-drop? It appears that he does. And it's a Foundry Denizen. DeMars will untap and take a draw step. He's got an Urborg. Black mana will not be a problem this game for either player. Scherer does have the dreaded Forest in his hand already.
Dastardly Forest.
Sticks out like a sore thumb. It's hard to miss. Here's a Dragon Fodder. That'll trigger Foundry Denizen twice. And perhaps the Denizen will get in for a few points of damage. We'll see what DeMars' hand lines up as. There are your 2 Goblin tokens. Here's an attack. Now, DeMars does have a copy of Bile Blight in hand. But if he's not casting that, I think it leads me to believe that there's...
Someone's about to get drowned.
Yep. But he's just got to pass the turn back at this point. Hordeling Outburst the draw.
This is a tough spot for Caleb to say no, because he didn't Bile Blight last turn. We might see Hordeling Outburst here and Brian get quite a bit of value out of it.
Here is the Outburst. You'll get a bunch of triggers, of course, you're finding Zen, and it'll become a 4-power creature. 3 more Goblins going to enter the battlefield. Here come the attackers. There is the Bile Blight. So Brian's patience looking to be paying off here. Does he take a hit for 4? Yeah, he does, but there's only one creature on the table now.
Exactly. And now something like Foul Tongue Invocation, any random removal spell really catches him right up.
Can Brian find a land? He does. It enters the battlefield tapped in Temple of Enlightenment, but it's better than nothing. He does get to scry, of course, as well. That top card going to go to the bottom. DeMars will have to pass the turn back. Scherer will take a draw step. A couple copies of Manic Influence in Caleb's hand at this point. He'll start his turn by playing one. The follow-up is Nylon of the Great Revel. That'll trigger. Now here comes the Denizen for 2. Scherer will pass the turn back. DeMars will take a draw step here. It's an island. It's land number 4. Remember, he scried the last turn to the bottom, so that's good timing for that. I think DeMars going to figure out how he wants to play the spell he's got. And I believe he has a Drowning Sorrow that's on the way.
I would imagine with the Bile Blight play that we saw from the earlier turns that Brian was hoping to drown if he drew land number 3. I don't know if he's going to cast it this turn, but I assume it's in his hand.
Okay, he's got 3 of that card after sideboard. 4 copies of Ultimate Price, too, so he's got a lot of black removal.
The risk here is that if Caleb has a Tarkus command and you cast Drown Sorrow, it's a disaster. Eidolon stays alive. You take 3 points of damage.
So we're going to find out right now, aren't we? There's your Eidolon trigger. Does Scherer have a Tarkus command? The answer is no. So DeMars does get to scry.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last call to sign up for today's Two-Headed Giant Challenge. If you would like to play a Two-Headed Giant, please come up to the stage now. Once again, this is the last call to sign up for today's Two-Headed Giant Challenge.
Top card going to stay on top for DeMars. We're going to head back Scherer's way. A mountain is the draw. Quite a few lands here. Swift Spear is going to help him rebuild some things. Let's see what the follow-up's going to be. It's got to be a Lightning Strike. Now here's an attack. So for total, it'll be 5 points of damage, though. Pass the turn back with him bluffing in a Tarkus command.
Well, I think you would have seen it because it would have killed him.
Yeah. So
that's quite the bluff because Brian's dead if he has a Tarkus
So I
command.
don't think Brian's buying it.
Right. He would have been dead last turn. He would have been dead this turn.
Yeah. DeMars will just pass the turn back. Here's a copy of Foul Tongue Invocation on the upkeep, revealing a dragon. It's Dragonlord Silumgar. This will allow DeMars to gain 4 life. He's up to 8. Scherer will draw. It's a copy of Eidolon of the Great Revel. Got to deploy that. Don't know how long it is for this world, but it's better than nothing. DeMars will take a draw step. Temple of Deceit, the draw. Top card looks to be an island. Looks like that's going to stay on top. There's 4 mana potentially. Let's see what we have here. Tasigur. That will not trigger the Eidolon too, so that's helpful for Brian.
Yeah, this card's very, very powerful for Brian post-board.
Another copy of Eidolon here.
I don't know. I feel like you can't not cast it.
Yeah, you know, Eidolon's weird in this matchup because it varies from how good it is. Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's a little too late to the party.
Caleb's losing to the board right now.
Yeah.
So I know this Eidolon comes with some risks, but I think he's dead for sure if he doesn't cast it. So he's got to just hope for the best from here.
DeMars will take a draw. There's an island. And the thing with Eidolon in this matchup, though, is situations like this happen when you're playing against Esper Dragons where the big spells start coming. Eidolon's not triggering. And now it's on the other side of the table thanks to Dragonlord Silumgar, and Brian is confident enough that he can attack with Tasigur. So things have certainly shifted in this game.
And how Brian does not need to cast any more cheap spells for the remainder of the game. He's got the win in play.
Hordling Outburst, the draw here for Scherer. And Scherer is going to concede this game. He can't get by those 2 big monsters. Brian DeMars is going to win game number 2 here over Caleb Scherer. Esper Dragons, Tarka Red, they're getting ready for game number 3.
So far, we've seen what we would come to expect. Game 1, solidly in Kalo's favor. Game 2, Brian's sideboard cards are exceptional. And now the real test comes with Brian on the draw.
That's where it gets hard.
Because even Drown in Sorrow is not going to be good enough some percentage of the time when Brian's on the draw.
These players will shuffle up here for game number 3. We will talk about the Summer Open Series IQs and what we've got available there. We've got open trials taking place and a lot of other fun stuff. And a sweet new playmat, too.
Yep, and these come with all sorts of exclusive prizes like the playmat that you see, Open Series entry vouchers, Open Series buys, SCG premium vouchers, so a lot to be won here.
Now keep in mind the Open Series buys, you can use those on a main event like today. Can't use those at invitationals anymore. No more buys in invitationals. We try to make that a tournament now where every player has to play every single round. Don't get a huge advantage in our biggest tournament of the year. But as you mentioned, playmat, vouchers, buys, premium vouchers, that playmat is really, really sweet. You can find out more information at Star City Games about the open trials that are available all summer long.
And buys at tournaments where, you know, we're typically looking at 9 rounds and X2 and 1, sometimes X and 3, makes it to the second day. That's a huge leg up.
For the attendance in this tournament, with 454 players, X and 3 is good to go.
Yep.
Note these players, no losses thus far. Caleb Scherer, Brian DeMars, both 3-0 this weekend. Atarka Red versus Esper Dragons. Esper Dragons looks like it might be looking to make a comeback now that Green Red Devotion is so popular. I think it's going to be a tough weekend for the Devotion strategy. Not to say that it can't overcome everything, but as you mentioned, it's really had its best performances when people didn't expect it. Grand Prix Miami with Green-White Devotion. I think of the Open Series in Houston that Robert Burney won with Green-Red Devotion. And of course, 2 weekends ago at the Season 2 Invitational, it really took that tournament by storm as well.
It's true of all decks in Magic, you know, but some decks in Standard are a little more robust to awareness than others. A deck like Abzan, a lot of it is your deck is what it is, and do you have the right responses to other people? People gunning for Abzan, that's not really a thing because all your cards kind of just work. But the more extreme strategies of the format, Devotion, Esper Dragons, Atarka Red, that is pretty sensitive to having the right deck at the right time.
Scherer going to take a mulligan very quickly, not like what he saw. See if DeMars is happy enough with what he's looking at. You saw him take a mulligan last game, but this is a deck in this particular matchup in Esper Dragons that, again, we expect to see mulligan a little bit looking for specific cards in the matchup.
I mean, Brian mulligan game 2, but drew his right sideboard cards, Drown in Sorrow and Tassiger, and he was just fine.
Yep. That's the trick.
If Brian dies, it's likely to be with spells in his hand. So he especially needs to be very aggressive about his mulligans. Caleb, because he's playing against a deck with a lot of answer cards, he will keep sketchier hands on the balance, but he also needs a good curve. He needs to capitalize on the fact that Brian doesn't do a lot for the first 2 turns.
Caleb is happy with his 6. No turn 1 play, however. Just a Wooded Foothills and a passing of the turn. If you're DeMars, you got to be thrilled about that. There's a Temple. DeMars will take a look at his top card, and we'll see where it will go from the scry. Moves to the bottom. Scherer will take a draw step. Picked up a copy of Lightning Berserker.
Ladies and gentlemen, you signed up for 2-headed giant.
There's another copy of Wooded Foothills. He'll sacrifice one of those.
On the pairings board,
He'll
next
dig
to
up a
the
mountain.
Liliana on blue paper. Once again, 2-headed giant. Seedings are up on blue paper next to the Liliana banner.
There's the Berserker. And pass the turn back over to DeMars. DeMars will take a draw step here. There's an island. You have to imagine he uses that one in his vintage deck quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm guessing so. And this is a spot where DeMars has one of his sideboarded ultimate prices, because this looks like the kind of spot where I don't really want to cast a spell because of Slumgar Scorn, and Brian can't cast Vile Blight, so I'm pretty well served just dumping as much mana as possible. And if that's the case and Brian has ultimate price, Caleb's really far behind.
Yeah. Scherer willing to sacrifice 1 fetch land. We'll see if he does want to dump some mana into Berserker. It appears that he does. He will dump again. Brian looking at his hand there. His ultimate price from the sideboard, as you did mention. That's a beaten. All Scherer can do is pass the turn back. And that's not really a card you expect from Esper Dragons. But Brian has 4 in his board.
Yeah, it's the type of card that I would just anticipate most of my black opponents have in some number in their sideboard, but 4 is a lot.
Yeah. And it's great in this matchup. Now, of course, the question is, does Brian have more lands to play? A little slow out of the gate here for turn number 3. There's a swamp. Here's a Duress. A card that I like a lot in this matchup, and taking a look at Scherer's hand, you can see exactly why. 2 copies of Hordeling Outburst, a Lightning Strike, and an Atarka's Command.
And this is a really dangerous spot for Caleb here, because if Brian takes the Hordeling Outburst and hasn't answered your other Hordeling Outburst, you got nothing going on. Brian's at 20, you got 6 points of burden in your hand.
Yep. And there goes an Outburst. You can actually see in Brian's hand now, he actually has a copy of Slumgar Scorn. So Scherer actually kind of needs to draw land to play the Outburst. He drew a copy of Dragon Fodder right now. Well, it looks like he might be moving towards the Outburst.
And last turn, Caleb didn't want to cast the Hordeling Outburst because of Slumgar Scorn, but now he has no choice. I mean, he's got to get something into play.
Yeah, I mean, in this spot, Slumgar Scorn could just be a hard counter, period. In this spot, I actually kind of had some interest in just casting the Dragon Fodder instead of the Slumgar Scorn. I actually like this because, it gives yourself the best opportunity to try to play around Slumgar Scorn in this spot. You're kind of hoping that Brian doesn't have a dragon in hand.
Yeah, I think this is a fine hedge. I'd feel more comfortable about this play if Caleb already had land number 4 rolled up, so we could play around Slumgar Scorn the same way next turn.
That's what a draw step's for. Atarka's Command.
Although it's possible Caleb's perspective here is just, I'm going to keep attacking. This is going to force some sort of removal, and then I can unleash the second wave of tokens.
Yeah. He's going to pass the turn back. It's tough because, when to hold steady and when to press forward is very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're playing Esper Dragons, because, you want to kind of put the pedal to the metal, but if you do, you work your way into Drown in Sorrow. But if you wait, you give them more draw steps to find answers to what you're doing.
I think Caleb needed to be a little bit more aggressive in the spot, because with Brian at 20 going into that turn, he's got to be risky about this. If he tries to play a normal game here and play around stuff, I think he's just going to be way too slow.
Yeah, on that turn, for example, if Brian had just played Dragonlord Ojutai, this game may have just ended.
Yeah. There's no response available at that point.
Here's an attack for 2. Looks like DeMars going down to 13. Scherer has drawn a land, but he's not willing to cast Hordeling Outburst now either. He's got 2 copies of Atarka's Command and Hordeling Outburst now. That may have been a turn where I've wanted to cast Hordeling Outburst.
Well, Caleb is he's kind of let himself down this path to some degree. At this point, Slumgar Scorn is likely to counter it. It would be unrealistic for Brian not to have a dragon at this stage. Also, now Bioblight's a consideration too. So that's why I would have preferred, I think, for the Hordeling Outburst, the initial turn, just because I don't think Caleb can afford to play around much stuff here.
And it gives Brian the window to do this, which is cast Dig Through Time, because he's not underneath a substantial amount of pressure.
Now, if you get in some early hits and Brian's at 11, let's say, and you have a Atarka's Command and Lightning Strike in hand, that's a different scenario. Then you might be able to beat Brian responding to you with stuff, but at the spot where Caleb was on that turn, I just don't think that's the case. Brian's had a Drown Sorrow in his hand. He hasn't even had to pull the trigger on it because the pacing of the game is so slow that Brian can afford to play around everything. He can take no risks this game.
DeMars is done resolving Dig Through Time, also taking a draw for the turn. Looks like he's found a copy of Dragonlord Ojutai. Haven of the Spirit Dragon is the land he'll play. We'll see what's next here for DeMars. Perhaps a Drown here. Drown Sorrows, it doesn't have to get $1 million for 1.
I mean, not at this stage. Brian's way ahead on mana. He's got a lot of cards to work with. He doesn't need this to be a game-winning play on its own.
But this is a pretty good play, too. It's a copy of Dragonlord Ojutai. The shields are down right now for DeMars, so he's basically saying, Caleb, do you think you can beat me right now? Because if Brian gets on tap here, life is pretty good.
Yeah, he's in a great position.
And to fire off a copy of Atarka's Command. 3 damage, put DeMars down to 9. Scherer gonna untap. Time for him to take a draw step. Picked up a copy of Foundry Tree Denizen. It's a little late to the party. Looking for that much earlier. This is the old rock and a hard place here for Scherer.
I have a lot of experience playing underpowered beatdown decks. Not that this Atarka red deck is particularly underpowered, but my philosophy with these decks is often, if you try to play around everything, you usually end up playing around nothing. Because your deck just doesn't have the power in it to play a longer game. And I think Caleb may have fallen into that trap this game. I don't think he could afford to try to play around everything. He's still gripping a Hordeling Outburst. Brian's about to go to 7 cards in his hand. I just don't think this is a tenable position. And Caleb, I feel like needed to take some risks earlier in this game.
Yeah, because Hordeling Outburst falls off a cliff pretty quickly.
Right,
in
yeah,
this
it's what's it worth now? I mean, it's still vulnerable to all the cards you were ostensibly playing around earlier in the game.
And when Brian is attacking here with Dragon Lord Ochitai, that's a sign that he's confident how things are going. If he's able to make this attack,
Yeah.
looks like he's going to take a duress from the Ochitai trigger.
I think DeMars has picked up a negate too. I think he's starting to lock up this game from every angle.
Yeah, here's Drown. The scry there of an island's going to go to the bottom. He's going to pass the turn back. Not too concerned with what's going on over there, given that he knows that they're holding Outburst. And now it's to the point here where you see the Hordeling Outburst, but it's more of a situation of Brian looking at his hand and saying, how do I want to deal with this?
Exactly. He's got total control of this game.
There's a Denizen past that turn back. One of those creatures on the battlefield is better than the other.
Brian with Foul Tongue Invocation in hand. I mean, this is all sewn up.
Yep. We'll get a trigger there from the Dragonlord Ochitai. I believe Slumgar Scorn is what he's found. Making life pretty good for the control player. There is Foul Tongue Invocation. Dragon already on the battlefield, and that is going to do it. Brian DeMars is going to win this match here over Caleb Scherer. 2-1. Esper Dragons will take care of Atarka Red, and for DeMars, the Grand Prix Boston Worcester champ a few years ago, and of course, vintage specialist, he's 4-0 here with Esper Dragons.
Yeah, great start there. And the game changed so much post-board because Brian's got an excellent sideboard for the matchup with his ultimate prices, his